So yeah, I'm Matthew Black from Unit 8, and I'm a program manager. So I think most of the introductions were done. I know this is a session really about sort of procurement and regulatory processes, so it may get, it can easily get quite technical. I think that was why I, as a very non-technical person, was selected to chair it. So hopefully I can, if I keep it grounded to what I understand, then I know everybody's going to understand. So I think we'll let each of the speakers go. And we'll probably, unless there's a burning question of clarity, we'll allow all the questions to be at the end. So we'll just go through the speakers. So yeah, we have Beverly Bradley, who's a technical specialist at UNICEF, and I don't know whether it's you alone or some team members coming in as well, but I'll hand over to you to begin.
Super, thank you. I do have two colleagues online, but I'll do most of the speaking. But I do want to say that the majority of the work related to the tender I'm going to speak about was done by my teammate, Hawa, so very appreciative to her and the hard work she's done updating UNICEF's catalog for 2024. So we can go to the next slide, maybe just to describe a bit for those who don't fully know how UNICEF Supply Division operates. We maintain a catalog of products that our country offices can order from. A wide range of products, all geared towards serving the needs of children. Predominantly, I sit in the Health Technology Center, which is where all of the procurement of medical devices sits. And in the case of pulse oximetry, when we tender for this product, it's not with any guaranteed volume of procurement in mind. The contracts that we establish is essentially to just put products into our catalog, and then the demand comes either from our program countries or from ministries of health that UNICEF is supporting through our procurement services. So that's why we tender. We tender to adopt products into our catalog. Just to give some context of the throughput that we do in the pulse oximetry space, clearly, I don't know how these numbers compare to like the US market, for example, so I don't have that context to offer, but I think this kind of just shows clearly what we saw during COVID and the wake of COVID, when resources were very much mobilized for oxygen and related accessories. And we did see quite a big drop in 2023. But, I think with this trend now towards implementation of all of the oxygen production capacity that has come into countries, we really want to continue pushing the need for pulse oximetry to accompany that and ensure that the right patients are getting oxygen. Just to note as well, we have 3 types of pulse oximeter in our catalog: a fingertip, a standard handheld, and then what we call multimodal, the handheld plus respiratory rate or other parameters. We previously did have a tabletop version, and in this tender we conducted in 2023, we dropped that product because we saw very little demand for it as a standalone device. Most countries would just opt for a multi-parameter patient monitor. So we decided to leave it out this time around. So we can go to the next slide. I just described this, so I could probably skip over it. But like I said, we have the fingertip and the handheld. In the multimodal space, we have sort of 2 specifications. One of them includes sort of a pneumonia screening type app. This product was a result of a innovation project that was funded by Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, but we also have one that's just SpO2 with respiratory rate. That doesn't have that screening, and it can be used in continuous monitoring situations and not just not just as a spot check device. We were asked to sort of describe what technical requirements as UNICEF. We have our own sort of list of requirements for all medical devices. So of course, the pulse oximeters were subject to these requirements. Any manufacturer of a medical device has to be certified to ISO 13485. If a wholesaler or supplier is responding to our tender, they themselves must be certified to ISO 9001. So for us, this, quality management system is really a key criteria for the suppliers that we work with. And then valid market clearance from one of these 5 regulatory authorities. For the most part, we tend to get products that are CE marked. Oftentimes they'll also have FDA. It's very rare that we would accept a device that only happens to have Canada, Health Canada market clearance, for example. So typically they're CE and FDA. Next slide, please. Of course, we're UNICEF, so in terms of the technical requirements of the device itself, our interagency spec definitely forms the basis of what we used for 2023. Recognizing that spec was, published in 2019. I think it was updated during COVID as well. Product standards, of course, the ISO 80601-2-61. We're getting very technical, is of course required. And then we also look at, medical electrical equipment safety standards. What I did want to note in terms of like anything that sort of deviated from that base 2019 spec, being very aware of this, global conversation on dark skin, we wanted to think about how could we try to incorporate that aspect into our evaluation this time. So we did incorporate a scoring criteria and just asked the bidders to provide any proof of performance in dark skin. We didn't know what we would get, and that's why we left it as a scoring criteria. But we did want to start dabbling in this and see what we could do from our vantage point, knowing that our tenders are very much sort of like desk review type technical evaluations. We don't do any product testing. We also added an annex that was scored to get into a bit more details on things like after sales service, training, warranty, and things like that. Next slide. I don't want to take too much time, so I won't go through this in detail, but it kind of just shows that the evaluation was very much a split between pass-fail requirements and scored things. So some things are, deal breakers, like the quality standards and things like that, but other things, there was a little bit of room for more subjective assessment, I guess you could say. So we'll move on. Okay, so what were the outcomes? In the fingertip category, we ended up finding 5 products technically acceptable. Some of those were duplicates, so suppliers submitted the same product. In the handheld category, we had 4 technically acceptable from 2 manufacturers. After our technical assessment, that's when the products go for commercial review. And that's where we try to sort of get the best value for money. So in the fingertip category, we didn't set up 5 contracts just because we found 5 compliant products. We try to look at things like lead time, price, global distribution, and those criteria help decide who would get the award. To point out some of the reasons why products failed, we found some interesting things related to risk classification, which I'll get into in our learning slide. Inability or insufficient, inability to provide proof of accuracy claims was another. If their data sheet says that their device is accurate plus or minus 2%, we actually do request that they show us proof of those accuracy claims that we, try to do a review of. And sometimes that can't be produced, which is sometimes shocking if the device claims to have some kind of regulatory approval. So we have to read the fine print, I think, is what we're learning. Runtime on battery was a key requirement for us in the settings that we serve. So sometimes devices failed on that criteria. As UNICEF, it's important that we have devices that can be used in neonates. So we have to ensure that there is an appropriate probe for that patient population. And IP rating is another criteria. Next. So what were some of the learnings? We found some interesting things related to, again, this is talking about CE and the MDD and MDR system. I know we'll probably get more into FDA later today, but the devices were classified differently, even within categories. So in the fingertip category, some of them had a class 2A, some of them had a class 2B, and it was, you know, not evenly split, but it's not like there was one outlier. And the same for the handheld as well, which made us dig a little bit deeper into risk classifications and ask ourselves, well, what is the one that we should enforce or consider required? And we consulted, I have a friend who's a regulator at Health Canada, and he kind of helped provide us with some unofficial advice as well on this. In the end, we ended up accepting either 2A or 2B in the fingertip category, but only 2B in the handheld, mostly because one of the use cases that we foresee in this category is a continuous monitoring situation. And the need for clinical alarms. And so you dig into the decision tree about how the risk classification should be decided. There's phrases like, if failure of the device could cause significant harm, then it should be a 2B. And, you know, but again, it's sort of like, risk classification process is complex. There's a lot of criteria that are considered. Clearly, we're seeing differences even within the same class. So I'll put that on the table as like a learning, and we're not really quite sure where that might lead. Then this evidence of performance in dark skin. Like I said, we weren't sure what we would see. Of course, as Mike introduced to us today, there's so many different classifications of dark skin. What does that even mean? We saw in-house data, third-party data, peer-reviewed studies. So there was sort of a wide range of evidence that different suppliers were able to produce. So we weren't really comparing apples to apples. But we could at least distinguish devices that could produce some type of data addressing this issue versus those that basically just produce the test reports showing that their sample had at least 2 individuals with dark skin. But again, of course, how is that defined? So, you know, basically they're just meeting the requirements of the standards and regulations. Last point, a lot of manufacturers have not completed their transition to MDR. So this is something we do need to closely follow up on, because I believe the deadline was this month, but that transition had to be completed. So again, as UNICEF, when we rely on things like having a CE mark, it becomes really important to make sure that these certifications don't expire during the time that we have a contract with that supplier. Next. So just to point out a couple things that are new for us. As I mentioned, this fingertip issue, we ended up qualifying products that had a 2A risk classification, but we also accepted the one that had 2B. But we created a separate material number, we call it material numbers, product number for this one, to set it apart from the others, because as you can imagine, there was a big cost difference. We didn't want to, lump all of our fingertips together when there was this key difference. And this product did have product testing showing their performance in dark skin. So we felt like it needed to sit aside on its own as an option for countries if they wanted to pay more for that, that feature. We also introduced a rechargeable fingertip, to assist countries that are looking towards more like sustainable options. We've introduced a multimodal that includes respiratory rate and temperature. And in the specifications that are listed on our catalog, we have tried to indicate those products where there was data for the dark skin pigmentation. Again, as UNICEF, we can't really make statements about the quality of that data, but we wanted to at least acknowledge that it was there, it was presented to us, and our countries could ask to dig into that deeper if it was an issue they really wanted to explore. So I think I will end there. Oh yeah, there was 2 questions posed to us about existing tools. Of course, we had a great collaboration with WHO developing that spec. We're definitely keen to keep it alive, and the Medevus system is great to allow for that. So we're definitely open to contributing learnings if a new version of this were to come out, especially with learnings from new regulatory processes. We also didn't do a spec for multimodal devices, so maybe that's something we should consider. And then just addressing this, third-party lab testing data from the point of view of a public procurement agency. These are amazing resources, but for us to sort of consider that as being an element of how we technically qualify a product, we would have to make sure that no one is, disadvantaged in competing for our tender by not being in your repository. So that's a consideration, as well as just whether or not there's sort of global alignment or consensus on the protocol. Because again, if a manufacturer doesn't want to opt into this because they don't agree with the protocol or something along those lines, again, they would be disadvantaged. So we always have to wear that hat of fairness and competition when we issue tenders. Is that the last line? One more. Yeah, how would the proposed regulatory change? I mean, the biggest thing really would be, it would really simplify our process to technically qualify products, because we could just trust that if it has this regulatory approval, or if they have proof of compliance to a standard, that we know then it ensures performance for all patients, and we don't have to dig deeper into very technical data that we may not be equipped to really interpret properly. So yeah, very, very welcome changes for us and the process that we have to follow. Does it impact the LTAs, the contracts that we've established? Likely not, but we always go through these tender cycles. So next time this comes up for renewal, any new learnings we can try to incorporate into that process and make sure we're getting the best devices for the countries that we serve. So that's it. That's it.
Thanks very much. Okay, we will have maybe just some clarification questions, not discussion questions, because we'll come into those at the end. Just a couple from me to start with. This is mainly from my own understanding. So the difference between the 2A and the 2B risk assessment means the 2B conforms to, or maybe you could just explain rather than me.
Yeah, it would have to go through a much more rigorous regulatory review process. in order to get their market clearance at that risk level.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is something that you guys dig into at all, but yeah, that's my understanding. So I think it's like class 1, they're not even equivalent to cross markets either. So the FDA class system is going to look different than the EU's and Canada's, but yeah, the class 2A would have gone through a much less rigorous review.
Okay, maybe we can revisit later on, right? There was an acronym, MDR, sorry.
Medical device
I was going
regulation.
to ask.
Medical device regulation.
Okay, right.
Yeah, so the EU regulatory,
It's a European regulation.
Okay,
Yeah.
it means something else. in my world, so, yeah.
sorry, I should have
It's
spelled
okay.
out the acronyms, but yeah, so the EU is going through this transition. There was a previous regulation, MDD. Everyone has to transition to MDR.
Yeah.
There's been sort of very long grace periods for this process because there's limited notifying bodies that can reprocess everything. There's been a lot of backlogs, but again, for us, if it's a requirement that a product has a CE mark, they need to show that they have transitioned to the new
Okay,
EU system.
good to know people are not developing a resistance to possibilities. And then, just last one, and then the interesting about the volume of sales. Do you have any idea how many countries that ends up covering?
Yeah, I should have maybe done a geographic split, but I mean, I'm sure we've
developing
supported like 70 to 100 different countries, like
Right.
especially during COVID, we've sent pulse oximeters everywhere.
Okay,
So you can imagine that this issue of dark skin is definitely relevant for a lot of the places where we send pulse oximeters.
okay, and then yes, okay, we have 3 clarifying questions ready, and then unless anyone's online, we'll move on to the next presentation.
Thank you for the presentation, and your work is very useful, as I said, for all organization, and it's the reference for us. So the SCOT criteria on dark skin, they are part of the guidelines now.
No, it's not officially integrated into the interagency spec. It was just something UNICEF added on.
Yeah,
to
because
our
you
latest
mentioned
tender.
2023.
Yes,
So you are planning to do it, but it's not there yet.
we did our tender. Yes, we did our tender in 2023.
Okay.
And we added that requirement to the WHO UNICEF specification.
Okay.
We always have to adapt that specification when UNICEF actually does a tender.
Mhm.
We also have packaging requirements that aren't universal, like there's other things that we have to integrate into our tenders. And so we thought, okay, here's a chance to also see what we could uncover with the dark skin issue. But the WHO UNICEF spec hasn't changed. But I think we would need to kind of learn a lot more first to know what would be the right way to update it.
And you mentioned long-term agreement. What is the cycle? 2 years, 3 years, 4 years?
Yeah, we
Oh, you
established them for, usually it's 2 years with the possibility of 2 extensions
Okay.
of 12 months
Like
each.
us.
Yeah.
Same.
Yeah. So if we feel like the market has really changed in 2 years, we can tender sooner. But if we feel like it's, going to be appropriate to just keep extending the contracts we have.
And you mutualize the contract with the other organization, like MSF, like
Do we what, sorry?
mutualize. You share.
Do we share?
With MSF, for instance, what you do with WHO, UNICEF.
Yeah.
But you have other organization, that can attach their business into those contracts or not?
It's possible to piggyback. We just have had some conversations with WHO. We're going to share our technical evaluation. So that other agencies can more easily qualify products. But sharing of LTAs is, I don't know, sometimes it gets complicated for other reasons, but I think there's genuine interest to not all be duplicating the same work, technical work.
We have long-term agreements with many manufacturers for biomed and different equipment. And we do mutualize those contracts with national societies, Red Cross, Red Crescent societies, with MSF as well sometimes. I have been approached by WHO yesterday, Sophie Laroche, that she was looking for also some agreements with specific equipment for surgery. So NSF so is using it as well. So now it would be good to have this because I realize many organizations are working on their own for this and that, but the main goal is so we can save time and money.
Yeah.
So thank you. Thank you
Okay.
for sharing.
Yes, yeah, and then Freddie.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Just two quick questions. First is that I have seen that you have put a very vigorous process about clinical trials and clinical studies to qualify a device. Again, the same question, we have neonatal population, we have pediatric population and adult population for the same device. So what is the threshold? Any one of them, if they have the clinical studies, any one of the population being involved, it's been okay, or we have a stricter one that they have to perform or they have to show you the data in each of these population before you consider them as a register. Second question is fingertip devices. In my experience, when I was practicing, these devices are not reliable for neonates and pediatric population at all. Right, there are many concerns, and still I'm seeing in many of the countries wherever I visit, I see that pink baby is having 76 SpO2, which is unbelievable. But still, people are using it because it's very convenient. I've seen that you also approve 7 devices. So again, the question is same. When you approve it, is it only for the adult population or that specific population, or it's across the board?
Well, I mean, there's no test data on children, right, as we know. So we're qualifying it on the basis that the intended use is stated to include children. And we also have, like the thickness range that would include children. So if the device is marketed as being used in children, then we would say that it is, that it can be used for that purpose. The fingertip, we don't ever recommend that would be used in a neonate. So that's where the handheld comes in with the neonate probes. Ideally reusable. I think one of our suppliers does have like a reusable probe with a single-use wrap. There's different variations of how to adapt for that population. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks. Maybe we revisit it when we've heard everyone as well. It's a quick one, yeah, Freddie, because I'm now seeing hands going up and I'm conscious moving to the next presentation.
Yes, thank you very much for sharing your insights. I think the process is quite rigorous. You mentioned that there's room for incorporating ongoing learning. I don't know if you can throw more light on that, because it seems like pre-marketing, there's some questions that cannot be fully answered. Is there a system to collect additional data from the users, particularly on performance in the field, that can inform the next evaluations, or is there room to improve that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I wish we had mechanisms in place to do more post-market surveillance. That's where projects like TIMSI are really helpful for us, because you can do that deep dive in the implementation and usability side, and that can help inform how we would adapt our technical requirements. Because unless we are funded to do a specific study on use in the field, yeah, unfortunately, we don't have systems to collect that kind of feedback. But I wish we did. It's such an important part of the equation.
Right. Yes. So that gives us another minute for questions.
We have 2 questions.
So there was
in the
2
chat,
online. I
one
can't.
hand raised.
One was about. Can you read there a little far away?
On the technical specifications for additional clinical data showing performance in patients with dark skin, do you mean manufacturers would be required to do clinical trials and better representation from darker skin pigments?
I think it kind of answered.
I think you can.
Yeah, so it wasn't required, it was something that just gave them additional points. So our technical evaluation was points-based. If they didn't have any clinical data, they just got 0 points. Didn't mean that that ultimately disqualified them if they met the threshold to overall be qualified. But we did want to see if we could start to distinguish products from one another by their ability to show performance in dark skin. I hope that answers the question.
And the second one's about clarifying the oximeters not meeting the IP ratings. I don't know if that meant what the clarification is. I mean, the specific devices or how you
Maybe
decide.
I can dig into that and answer in the chat
Okay,
later,
all
if
right.
that's okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's great.
yeah.
And then there's, I hope it's a very quick question because we're going to move on to the next presentation.
Thank you, Meth. Indeed, it is a quick one. In fact, it's a part B of your question on the coverage of the UNICEF support. So the part B of it is that how actively UNICEF is extending its support or letting the local procurement authorities know that there is a service, technical services offered by UNICEF. My worry is that some local procurement countries like MSD might not be aware of that and struggling to get the technical specification and the services, while there is already a good work has been already done by UNICEF, which would have been easier. So how actively is it that UNICEF is communicating this information to the local countries, especially in low middle income countries?
Yeah, thanks. So if I understand your question correctly, I hope I do. You know, we at Supply Division, we established this catalog and it's there to serve primarily our country offices and the work that they do in collaboration with ministries of health. So if our country office has a key program that involves pulse oximetry, they can come and use our catalog. If a ministry wants to engage in pulse oximetry, they see UNICEF as potentially a useful procurement partner, they can approach the local UNICEF country office, and then they can work with Supply Division on procurement. So I think it really depends country to country on the projects that are ongoing there, and how strongly they are working in the oxygen space. Many of our country offices are, but not all. And so, yeah, I think it depends on the location, whether or not they'd make use of our catalog. But we internally definitely disseminate these learnings, and our country offices know when we have updated products in the catalog.
Thank you very much. Thanks very much for the presentation, which covered a lot of aspects and even delved into maybe some of the discussion areas. So that was very good in provoking a lot of discussion on that. So we're going to move on. We're going to hand over to ICRC, Pierre and
Vishal, and we have Felicity also on board if there are some points. Yeah.
So I think there'll be Pierre. Let me hand over to you first.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. So once again, so thank you for the invitation and very useful information. We see that progress is made on specification, so it's useful for us. So basically, well, the ICRC is intervening in conflict areas, so we support a larger numbers of hospitals, health facilities, beaches, etc. First aids as well, teams all over the places where we work to assist and protect victims of conflict. For the biomed activities, it's a general turnover of 24 million Swiss francs with all the products. So we had a peak for oximetry and this equipment, of course, due to the COVID. I don't have the figure in mind, but it's quite, it was huge, so it dropped a bit. On the technical procurement side, so we, as I said, we use the guidelines from WHO as part of the specification. We use also the CE norms, the ISO norms. So those are the requirements. We have specialists helping us at the procurement level to address those technical points, selection of suppliers, One point is also, as I said, the origin of the product, which is becoming a challenge nowadays. And then everything goes well, we select. So we have the chance in the ICRC for such a market over 100,000 Swiss franc yearly to go for selected suppliers, and then we invite them to tender. So then we do the selection on the 6-7 suppliers, and then we can select 1 or 2 depending on the demand, the product specification, or 3 if need be. And then we have also a process of contractualization for 2 years in the new rules, and we can extend for 2 additional years based on additional quotation and change of price if there is price adaptation. This is more or less how it works and how we do, but we rely on your work. So I don't know, Wissal, on the biomedical side, if you would like to address some points. So Wissal is our biomedical focal point for the ICRC based in Amman, and she's covering all the biomedical domains for the institution, and also a referral person for national societies. So thank you, Wissal, for joining us.
Thank you, Pierre, and thank you everyone for the invitation. It's a really interesting discussion, and I really do believe that because of such initiatives, we collectively improve the assistance we provide and the populations, the donations we provide to the population we serve. I want to say that, as Pierre explained, we follow a similar process done by the UNICEF. We have our own technical specification. We draft our own, but we also consult with the ones published by WHO and UNICEF just to make sure that it is aligned. We are relevant to what is being done by other actors as well. The challenges we face, I would say, is that we don't receive complaints, let's say, from the field in terms of complaint to the medical device itself, because I will give the floor to Felicity to explain more on how we handle this issue clinically. The other challenge we face is that in many contexts, it's difficult for us to send our standard item. For instance, out of the tendering process and out of the agreement that Pierre mentioned we have this standard item. When the field requests or order, this is what we send. But in many contexts, where we work, where it's affected by conflict, where it's quite critical in terms of importation, in terms of the presence, let's say, of a representative of the manufacturer, the field many times opts for a local purchase of items, and this is where we are not sending our standard item, which went through this vetting process, but we still try to make sure that whatever is being purchased in the field still complies with the technical evaluation we used for this specific tender or for this specific item. For the issue at hand, the sensitivity of pulse oximetry to darker skin tones, I would say, and I would admit that we are a bit behind on that topic. And I believe that once certain regulations are updated, this will push us and encourage us to revise our technical specification, revise the items we currently use as a standard, because in the ones we are currently using, our technical specifications don't inquire or didn't push the manufacturers we invited to provide data on this specific specification. And in that case, we are not even considering this when we selected the products that we have selected. So we are learning, and this is why I really appreciate that we were included in such a discussion. The other thing that I see, which could be an issue between the fingertip pulse oximetry and the handheld pulse oximetry, we feel a bit more that our option for handheld oximetry could be a bit more reliable, because it's an equipment which involved a bit more research and a bit more development. And unfortunately for fingertip oximetry, this is considered a very low cost and a low investment item. Especially during the times of COVID, people were, facilities and hospitals, if something didn't work, they would just replace one. And I think whenever the item we have is more low cost, so it's considered as a low investment by the facility, this discourages the manufacturer to invest more research into the accuracy of that item and into the inclusivity of that product. I want to give the floor to Felicity to explain a bit more on how we handle the issues related to the accuracy and the sensitivity of the pulse oximetry to darker skin tones in the field, and how we address that clinically.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me at the moment? Because my mic
Yep.
was having an issue. Okay. So thank you. I think my colleagues have talked about the quality or the safety nets that we have to ensure that we get the right product or quality product to the field. But also to note that ICRC hospital projects are based within a working system or an existing system. It means that we plug in a section of a hospital which is already existing. That means that we might really look for quality in our section where we work. However, when we work within a system, we find that that quality is not reflected in the rest in the rest of the hospital. An example is that if you're supporting an emergency department, but these patients will afterwards go to the wards, for example, it means that the quality of care is cut. So that means that when you plug into systems, we try our level best to ensure that, now talking about pulse oximetry, is that we ensure that we try to preach good practices to our partners to ensure that they are aligned in terms of quality of care. So, but that's the biggest challenge for us, that we can only assure quality within where we work in a section of a hospital, but we need to inject more into the entire system. Talking about that, at the point of care, so what we did is that in my 7 years of experience in the field, what used to happen is that, yes, we used to really have a lot of challenges when among others, when it came to pulse oximeter, which was largely used in transporting of patients, the finger probe from the emergency department to let's say the wards or critical areas. So what we did is that we tried to rely on clinical assessments rather than a pulse oximeter, because you don't have that luxury of a cardiac monitor. So what we observed is that the cardiac monitor, if you put a patient on a cardiac monitor, then the accuracy is higher. But on the finger probe, because of many reasons, one of them is the dark skin, the other one could be cold skin. So it was not really inaccurate. But then what we did is that we rely more on the clinical assessment of the patient rather than the machine dependency. But apart from that, we ensure that we have capacity building or trying to create standards, as I said, working within a system for the entire hospital to ensure that the quality that the ICRC follows should be a direct reflection of what the hospital has to follow. So those are a few points from the point of care perspective. But then it's a work in progress. It's very difficult to really like penetrate into an existing system, but we try our level best to ensure that quality is observed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, the ICRC team. Is there any clarifications? Because I'd quite like to move on. We've got one more presentation and I'm in danger of being behind time.
Maybe those could be in the chat, clarification.
Yeah, you can put
questions.
clarification questions in the chat, and let's get the third input, and then we might be able to have a little time at the end for discussion. So Umberto is online from the, I'll let you introduce yourself, but from the UNOPS and the Goal Initiative as well. So Umberto, I can hand over to you to provide what you've prepared as an input.
Yeah, thank you. And good morning, everybody. I'm Umberto Vitale. I am a medical device advisor in UNOPS HQ in Copenhagen. UNOPS is a United Nations Agency for Project Services. And I mean, UNOPS is a little bit different compared to other UN agencies, because UNOPS is a project-based agency, so we don't have a mandate, we don't implement programs in the healthcare sector. So we are project-based. But that said, like, health procurement is basically almost half of the budget of UNOPS, including infrastructure and procurement. And I would say like it's approximately like 4 billion in the last 3-4 years. And we had procured a lot of oxygen therapy, oxygen commodities, oxygen therapy devices, and oxygen plants, like accumulating more, a couple of $100 million in the last few years. So I would say, as a author of the technical specification of the WHO UNICEF oxygen therapy devices, I can ensure that UNOPS is fully aligned and adopts the WHO UNICEF specification. But that said, and being UNOPS project-based, the majority of our procurement is domestic procurement, international open tenders, but we call it domestic procurement because it is run by our country offices, and it is specific for the project that we implement. So we have the also internal guidelines that refer to the available best practices, standard technical specifications, and global standards as published by WHO, UNICEF, and PATH, and other sources. But then we adapt these specification to the specific tender that we have to publish in our projects. So we can say that we are fully aligned, but we don't directly use the specification in our procurement. We have also global procurement platform, which is UN WebBuy. It is open not only for UNOPS internal use and for UNOPS projects or UNOPS partners and beneficiaries, but also to any other UN agencies and any other international organization and government that would need to purchase products. And we may also, like, according to the situation, piggyback or share our LTAs and other UN LTAs. So that said, I think that it is important. I mean, the main criteria that we adopt in all our procurement, as stated in our quality assurance for policy for the procurement of medical devices, are basically the CE/ European CE/CE/US FDA regulatory compliance, regulatory approval. We also accept like Canada, Japan, and Australia I mean, like the former GHTF countries, but they are a bit less common in the international market. So, which is dominated by CE and FDA approved products. And we request ISO 13485 for the manufacturer of the medical devices. We also look into the national regulations when, if and as applicable. So, for example, national registration of the pulse oximeter, in general, the medical device that we procure for certain projects. And we may also agree with the governments and the beneficiaries, like fast-track processes to register, to approve locally products that are not yet available in that market, in order to improve the competition and to maximize value for money in the procurement that we do on behalf of our partners. We do desk review of products like UNICEF. We don't normally do testing of products. And what we really look forward in order to improve our procurement, to facilitate the inclusion of specific tender requirements that will address the increase of performance with the dark skin tones of the pulse oximetry, is the standardization of testing of these features, and maybe innovations that can be streamlined and can be, I would say, standardized into the market. Because the way that the typical procurement process that is adopted both for long-term agreements, global or local, and for domestic, for one-off procurement, is the ITB structure, invitation to bid, where the technical evaluation is a pass-fail process, is not a scoring. In order to include specific criteria for the evaluation of dark skin tone performance of pulse oximetry, we need the standardization of this requirement. We need the general acceptance of what is the testing, what is the scoring, the minimum threshold. So something which is very much harmonized and internationally recognized and agree, and also integrated into the guidelines that will follow. Like, for example, the WHO UNICEF technical specification. If there is any chance to, in the short term, to have these testing and benchmarking of pulse oximeters standardized and harmonized, that would be really helpful. And this is the way forward, we think, to be included as a mandatory requirement in the procurement. Because otherwise, we can support that, but we cannot make a pass-fail. We cannot include a pass-fail condition in our ITBs. In general, what we look forward also, and what we generally do, is to include heart rate and respiratory rate in the technical specification that we use. We, of course, don't recommend fingertip pulse oximeter for diagnostics. We recommend them for monitoring, in general screening, and in particular, we don't recommend them for infants. However, we are driven by beneficiary requirements, because we don't implement programs. So it's sometimes limited, the possibility that we have to negotiate requirements with the partners. So this is, in a nutshell, what we do as a UNOPS. We don't have we don't develop internal. We don't develop innovations in these regards, because we are a demand-driven organization. But we will be really happy to support the development of these harmonized standards and harmonized testing procedures in order to incorporate these features and to improve the products that we procure. Over.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Umberto. I don't know how long you want to keep me. I don't hear you to touch soon. Yeah. So, so I think maybe to summarize, I think in terms of the inputs again, Umberto, thank you very much. That was very interesting. What I'm sort of hearing across the different presentations is this need and seeking for the standards that come out in December to hopefully provide as much clarity as possible in terms of being able to make these specifications. What I was also hearing from Mike, which is maybe something we'll discuss later on, is we're not quite sure to what extent that will be provided by those standards. And then there are other important aspects that in increasing these regulations, how they might have work out in terms of the cost that is then passed on to the buyer. But I think we'll touch on that this afternoon. And also what came out to me indirectly is sort of some of the assumptions that are maybe made, even by people like Unitate when we're looking at these things, but in terms of what people want the device for, is that they really sort of sometimes expect a diagnostic device, but we're talking about something much more niche, as a more sort of a monitoring device in terms of PO. So maybe I'll just get final reflections from the panelists about what they think in terms of that, and then what kind of they see as the future in terms of moving forward with this, and then also maybe picking up on the point, Pierre, you said about the need for greater collaboration and mutuality in terms of the devices. So knowing your time is pressed, I go to Pierre first, and then Beverly, and then
I would have to leave the audience, so I would like to thank you, Pat, for the invitation. And I see that there's good coordination amongst the international organization, so it's good that things are moving forward. Thank you, Mike, for the work you have done with your university, and the findings and the insight you presented, very useful. So we'll work on this. We'll pass those findings. I hope the presentation will be available for distributed, so we will disseminate this as much as we can. And we look forward to cooperate and be in touch. And thank you very much. I leave my card on the table. Take picture, and you have my contact. Voilà. Thank you, Wissal. Thank you, Felicity, for your input as well. And I wish everyone a good session this afternoon. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Beverly, did you have a final reflection?
I think I'd probably just reiterate some of Umberto's comments about harmonization. So from the procurement agency point of view, we definitely want to make sure that as like a UN body that we are aligned on these things. And this time around, UNICEF, we went with solicitation type called request for proposal, which allowed us to score things and have a little bit of flexibility to learn. But if we do go with something that's going to be pass fail, as Umberto said, we want to make sure that we are going to be aligned on what those criteria are, so that we are all sort of fairly assessing suppliers in the same way. So that, I think that's one key message to reiterate from the procurement agency point of view.
Okay. Umberto, did you have a reflection?
Yeah, thank you. I fully agree. Thank you, Bev, and I fully echo what you say. I mean, I think that the standardization and to agree any standard and standard testing, and it's the key in order to help the market to develop these features in a consistent manner, in a manner that can be reflected then in the procurement processes, which are very rigid and transparent, but in a manner that also it's useful for the market. So we have to support the market, to shape the market in order to let it develop consistently certain features that we would like to have in our procurement. Yeah, over.
Thank you. I don't know if Felicity or Visval wanted to add anything online. I put your hands up if you did. Visval.
No, just to thank you again for this discussion, and I really do believe that these efforts, as Umberto said, would help us to push the innovation further in this. And I think if we don't do that, then we will have to be selecting from whatever is available, and sometimes that is not living up to what is needed. So, yeah.
Good. Okay. So I think there's an awful lot of questions that could spiral off this or come in, but I know we have a lot of sessions to go, which maybe we'll zero in on those. So I think we'll leave the discussion there for now. I want to thank the panelists in the room and online as well, and thank everyone for all the good questions as well. But I hand this back over to the host. Thank you very much, everyone.
Yeah, I think we have a